Okay, greetings and welcome to, I can't call it Legally Live because we're doing a rebrand. So it's temporarily going to be called the Pan-African Community News, something like that. I wanted to call it a So It Go, but we're still debating whether we should kind of like use a kind of, the kind of like a casual language inside our title. This is our first time streaming both to YouTube and Facebook. So if you're wondering what on earth is Toyin doing here on this channel, on this platform, we're just testing out a few things, a few ideas and stuff like that. There's going to be a lot of gremlins. It's new technology. It's a new format for us. But what we do is go over the news that's happened in our community over the last couple of weeks and just have a quick chat about it, essentially. So I'm here in the studio with, as ever, Sister Oleander. I don't know if you want to say hi.
Greetings, everybody.
And
you're having a lovely
classically,
Sunday.
she's muted.
Give thanks for that. Greetings, everybody. I hope you're having a lovely Sunday and keeping well.
Cool. And thank you for that. And I'm going to just get on with the news. We've got a jam-packed show. We've got a lot to talk about. So, I'm really going to whiz through the stories as quickly as possible. So let's put up with me. We haven't got all the usual gear that we normally have. So I'm going to be looking down at the monitor quite a bit as well. I'm reading bits and pieces. And over the next few weeks and months, hopefully we'll streamline the process. So let me tap onto the first story. And this is one about this the PCS Union, which is a union for civil servants, and they're threatening the Cabinet Office with legal action over racism and bullying. Now, this is a really important story, just simply because people kind of forget the fact that what's taking place inside number 10 Downing Street with all the so-called alleged parties, well, they're not alleged parties, they're actually real Christmas parties that happened during lockdown. Also, we had problems taking place inside the Cabinet Office and Downing Street and other sectors of Whitehall as well. And I think this was a research that was done where something like 60 different complaints have been made about racist bullying inside the civil service or inside Whitehall. And what's happened is the PCS, who's the largest union for civil service workers, they're actually now going to approach the Equalities and Human Rights Commission to see if they can actually deal with this, because their complaints are not being taken seriously. So I thought I just wanted to share that with you. Remember, of course, you can chat on the YouTube chat and the Facebook chat. I'm really new to all this, so please bear with me. Well, I've got the gremlins. That's why Oleander's here. Couldn't do it without her. She's going to be managing the responses and stuff going back and forth. But please, your interactions are really important, because it's about you, and you're going to help us shape this to make it work into a format that is useful to us as a community. So let me go to the next news story, and that's one about Higher Education Statistics Agency finding that there's only 1% of the UK's 22,000 professors are of African heritage. Now, you may have heard this story before. There was an amazing campaign in 2017 about why isn't my professor black? The downside is that this is still the case in higher education. So these are the figures. This is 1%. And when we say 1%, I think it's about 160 professors of African heritage or African and Asian heritage. I've got to double check that, because sometimes when these bodies use the term black, we're not 100% sure. So when they use that term, black, 1%, 160 people out of 22,000 professors across the UK. Now, there are moves taking place to actually address that issue, and we're going to keep an eye on that and keep reporting back to you on what's taking place. You know that I am, well, some of you will know that I actually now work at UCL, or University College London, and I'm definitely, as a scholar activist, engaged and pushing and prodding and being mischievous to kind of like move things in the right direction. So the next story I want to cover is the BBC. It comes from the BBC, and it says that the NHS is riddled with racism against minority ethnic doctors. Now, if you can see from the statistics, what are over there is that they surveyed, I can't remember how many doctors were surveyed. There's quite a few of them, but 76.5% of them said that in the last couple of years, they had experienced at least one or two racist incidents. I mean, all the statistics are actually on the slide over there. But one of the problems that we're finding out is that 40% of the GPs, and I think this wasn't looking just at nurses and kind of like the security and hospitality staff inside the service staff inside hospitals. This is looking specifically at doctors. That 40% of the staff in NHS who are doctors are from minority ethnic backgrounds. So this survey is quite important when you kind of like learn that actually it's like this is 76% is a really high percentage of people who experience racism on kind of like continuously over the last 2 years, and some of them, I think it was around 14% if you look at the figures there, on almost a weekly basis. So there's a big problem that's taking place, and this again is happening straight after what we've seen with the lockdown over COVID-19. I am whizzing through the stories as I usually do. If there's any questions, please put them inside the chats, and Oleander will introduce them and we'll try and go through them. So the next story that I want to talk about is let me see if I can bring this one up. There we go. This is a really lovely story in many ways. It's about how well, there was, I don't know if you know, I think we spoke about this probably last year. This was about the Save the Ridley Road Market campaign, and it's actually a lovely story in the news. It's a local newspaper that talks about how the fight against gentrification was actually won by street traders who actually pushed back and fought against the building that they were. And if those of you who have gone to, who live in Hackney or use Ridley Road Market, you will know that actually there's been a long-standing campaign by traders, residents, to save the building, which has been known as what's it called, a Ridley Road Village. Like, I've forgotten the exact term of it. I'll to remind me of that one. Now, what's happened is that over the last few weeks, Hackney Council, and this is actually a really positive story in a sense, have actually come out and said, we're going to take over the lease. We're going to save this, this building. And it was touch and go many times. Push and prod between the developers who wanted to turn it into to rental spaces, or not rental, accommodation, and solve the housing crisis in Hackney, and street traders had to push back and said, no, there's lots of other spaces in Hackney that can use to develop housing stock. This space is iconic. This space has been here since the 1800s in Ridley Road, and we just need somewhere to trade. And the traders who had been there for decades were starting to suffer from mental health issues, but they were still turning up every week to sell their wares. So to hear the news a couple of weeks ago that Hackney Council has intervened again, because they had intervened in the past, but we hadn't really seen positive outcomes from that. This time they've intervened and taken over, from what I hear, the lease. We now know that the space is actually safe for them. I forgot the name of the landlords, Rainbow something, but they are still a little bit aggressive, still trying to maximize the commercial value of the space. But this is really a great story which pushes back against gentrification in the borough. And from what I've read is that there's going to be £1 million investment in the Ridley Road area. I think some of that money came from City Hall. But that £1 million investment means that there'll be more trees, there's going to be public Wi-Fi, and other kind of facilities. And I like the idea that you can be able to walk through Ridley Road Market, and if you don't have data and you're in there, you're doing your shopping, but actually once the public Wi-Fi infrastructure's in there, and you've got the chairs and you've got the spaces, you can actually do your shopping, you can meet your families and friends, and not feel that pressure that you often feel in other parts of the borough that I've grown up and born.
Can I just say, so for me, Ridley Road Market is iconic, and it's been there for so long, and I really feel that that whole area should be saved, almost like a what do they call those buildings, grade 1 listed buildings.
Yes.
So I know it wouldn't be saved as a grade 1 listed, but I just think the history of that place, I used to go there as a child, and I know you did too, Toyin, but I never grew up in Hackney. So for me, that whole market was something to behold. It was just, it's so full of character. There's just so many positive things about that market, and I really am glad that it has been saved, and hopefully it won't be threatened again.
Well, I'm totally with you. I mean, as you know, I was born and I raised up in Hackney, and every Friday we used to walk towards what should we call it, to the Sainsbury's that used to be on the high street. I mean, you know, I'm talking about way back, maybe 20, 30, no, probably over 30 years ago. And, you know, I used to go there with my dad and my sister, and we'd always get buck up with aunties and we'd be chatting inside that space. And it was a real cultural icon. I mean, it was, you know, that space was something really emotive to be in there. I mean, as children, you kind of got annoyed of kind of like sometimes your aunties would be and your dad and your parents would be there kind of chatting for like, you know, ages and ages and ages and ages. And you're kind of like, okay, can we go home now? But there was a feeling of community. And, you know, this is part of the pushback against gentrification in Hackney, and Hackney has suffered greatly from that. So yes, this is a good development, and thank you, Linda, for sharing that. You know, we'll keep an eye on that, and we'll come back on that particular issue as we get more news on it. So let me go to the next story, and and this one's a really interesting one. This one's about an anti-racism body that's going to be set up in Gloucestershire. Now, Gloucestershire, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but Gloucestershire Council has been recently, I think even in our last broadcast, we spoke about the issues they've been having with the legacies of, or toxic legacies of racism and slavery in the area. I think they had a couple of street names after a slaver who actually opposed abolition of slavery. And so they're in the process of actually changing the names of those street names. But this particular story comes out of the fact that they had commissioned a report to look into racism in the area, and they came up with these. And it's not one of these tokenistic things which just comes today and goes after a couple of weeks. This is actually said to be properly funded and actually to be permanent. Now, the reason why this is an important story to share is because many of us may not remember this, but that's how it used to be. You know, all the boroughs, especially in London, but all the boroughs all over the place, used to have anti-racist groups and commissions that were funded by the council, and believe it or not, a group called the Commission for Racial Equality. And what happened was that when there were local disputes to deal with racism, you could always check out your local race equality group in the area. They would have a seat on the council and be able to make direct petitions to local authorities and start getting changes. But over time, what happened was that CRE was disbanded when Trevor Phillips declared multiculturalism the enemy of the state, and you know, all these kind of foolishness, saying that we were living in ghettos. And when CRE was abolished, before racism actually was dealt with, the RECs, I think they were called, race equality councils, they started to dwindle away because they lost their funding. So the fact that Gloucester is actually saying, hey, we're going to do this, we're going to fund it, and we're going to make sure it's a permanent body, that is amazing. It's the sort of thing you'd expect to start in London, to be honest with you. I'd expect that to be in Hackney, given the activist character of Hackney. But the fact it's starting in Gloucestershire is a great example of what can be done. And we're going to start seeing street names in Gloucestershire that are still named after slavers who actually, and just be clear about that, they actually campaigned against the abolition of slavery. Those names are still up. Those are going to be coming down. So I thought it was important. Watching me, Toyin Agbetu, Dr Toyin Agbetu, I'm still getting used to the titles and all this kind of stuff. It's a Pan-African Community News Network. Didn't really like the title. I'm still playing with the idea of Soy Gore. It's still my fun one. But you know, I'm sure I'll get ideas and suggestions from some of you. You're free to put chats on YouTube or Facebook. This is the first time I think we're broadcasting on Facebook. I have an issue with broadcasting on Facebook, but my children are, Daddy, you have to go where our community are. You've got to go on Instagram. And my cousin, my nephew, you've got to go on Twitter. So eventually I will start doing all those other things as well. But you know, I don't really like this chat live to the camera. But this is normally an hour-long program. I whiz through the news of the last couple of weeks. I'm in the studio with Oleander, so I won't see the chats immediately, but she can see them, put them online, blah, blah, blah. So, you know, respond to them. And yeah, I think, yeah, that's it really. Okay, so let me go to the next story. And that's one about, let me see if I can bring it up so you can actually see it. Well, okay, 100 years. There we go. And this is a really interesting story. This is about a mother who has 4 children, and she's facing being kicked out this week, literally this week, from what's been called a forever home. This is where councils kind of like let you purchase the properties and you have it forever, essentially, in a row, an argument over £9,000. Now, this, you might be thinking, well, if it's a forever home, why the council kicking her out? And why are they kicking her out of a home that she's purchased for £9,000? I've read up on the whole story. Well, I've read up on all the stories. I don't need to say that. But from what I can get from the story, some years ago, they deposited £6,000 in her account, and then they made an error. They deposited another £6,000 in her account. She made a mistake. She spent the money paying bills. It came off. There was a court case. The court case, they kind of harassed her to get the money now. That took bills of up to around, I think it was £20,000, might even be more than that. And so she's been kind of like paying it off bit by bit, trying to do deals. The council saying this is going on for ages. This is like 5, 6, 10 years. We just, I think it's 6 years. We just need to just deal with it now. She said, I ain't got the money. I can only pay it this way. And so there's lots of the point that, look, we've tried everything. We're done with this now. What's going to happen is that you're going to come out this week. We're kicking you out. And she's like, well, look, this is only a couple of grand left to pay you. This is supposed to be my home. You can't run me out of my home. They're going to run her out of a home. And, there's something very distasteful for me about that. There's something really, I don't, it feels wrong. Well, it's not, it feels wrong. It is wrong. I'm not doing the wrong and strong. Anyone who knows me, I don't do wrong and strong. She was wrong to spend the second £6,000. She should just send it straight back immediately. I don't know her circumstances. Oh, yes, I do actually, because in the article it explained that her father had passed away. So some of the money that she spent was for the funeral and to send her father's body back home. So there was all those kind of issues. But this is a new story. This is the sort of thing that's set in a way, because I think like she owes like £2,000 left. She's got 4 children. She's been working to try and deal with this issue. She's going to be made homeless today. And to be honest with you, we should have people in our community, and it's not that we should do. We do have people in our community that £2,000 is what they use to wipe the bum with. You know what I mean? They can settle this out and then sort out a payment plan with it or something. So I just want to share that story because that's something that's new. That's the kind of conditions we're dealing with today. And to be honest with you, as people rush to go back to what they call normal, we're going to learn about a lot of people who are going to start feeling that pinch about all the borrowing, all the things they've had to do, all the little runnings to survive the pandemic, to survive the lockdown, the loss of income. And we're going to hear a lot more stories like this. So I just thought I'd share this. And sometimes people have got to make harsh decisions. They've got to do tough things just to survive. When you're a parent, you've got children, you've got bellies to fill. You're going to do things that have to be, that skirt around issues of legality. As long as you're not hurting anyone, I don't personally have a big issue with it. So I thought I'd just share that story with you. Okay, where are we next? Now this is this is linked directly to what I was just talking about there. And this is basically a report that's saying that there's an increase in inequality of access to education and good jobs, which are caused by the pandemic, which I was just talking about. And it's not going to, but it is actually leading to an increase in poverty levels amongst ethnic minority communities. I don't think there's much I need to elaborate on that. If I remember correctly, the report came from a doctor in Leicestershire and one, I can't remember, I think it was an American. Was it American or was it a continental a university that aggregated some of the data, compiled it, and started looking at the trends of what's happening, and they were finding that people from minority communities who are hit hard by the pandemic, they're finding it difficult to get jobs. The jobs that they're getting are not sufficient to pay all their bills. Access to education is becoming harder again, and so they're recognizing that straight away. We're starting to see problems. We're starting to see real issues of social injustice taking place and bearing up, and just as during the pandemic, those people who are on the front line, those who are doing like what we call what do they call frontline work, they are being the brunt of this so-called COVID recovery, and we ain't even dealt with the issue of Brexit. Another story is this one from Paul Boateng, and I say the story's from Paul Boateng, but this one is actually from one of the church papers. And this is where he's actually commenting on a report called Lament to action. And this is where the church have actually, or I say the church have, in, I think it was last year, 2020, the church commissioned, I think it's the Anglican Church, commissioned a report into racism within its ranks, and it found it was pretty bad. And Paul is just banning them. He's just coming out and just telling it as it is, that it's disgrace, it's shameful. Webley, he's coming out, one of the bishops, he's saying that we know slavery is a sin, these things, racism is bad, we've got to do something about that. This report that they commissioned, Lament to Action, which the church in its critic, they signed up to all the recommendations, and the recommendations were quite varied, such as co-opting people onto its panel of bishops where there's no diversity whatsoever, and saying let them become participant observations and give them votes so they can actually start to change the process inside the church. I mean, that's just one example. There's a whole lot. I mean, I think I saw 5 recommendations where the church is saying we know something's got to change, and we're going to keep some of these policies in place until we start to see that change. I thought it was interesting to share this story because this is the Church of England. And you've got to understand, if there's an issue of moral degradation or moral impropriety in the church, in England's, established religious center, it kind of reflects perhaps what's going on in its political heart. If you're having problems that go even into its spiritual heart, is there any surprise that you have the madness during this Johnsonian era with politicians telling lies and using a government purse as a piggy bank for all their mates to kind of like get PPE contracts and all the kind of likes? So that's what this story really says to me. I'm going to continue on, and like I said, I'll bring this one up again just so you can see in a bit more detail. Justin Webley, Archbishop of Canterbury, he is criticised. We spoke about this a couple of weeks ago. There's been a delay in the removal of a memorial to a slaver in Oxford College, and he's being bold with his comments. He's coming out and saying, "Look, this shouldn't be happening. Slavery is clearly a sin. It's certainly a problem. What's the delay? Let's just do this." I think they call it a Jesuit college. I'm not really familiar with all these terms, etc. So this is what's taking place in the UK today. This is not like 100 years ago, and this is coming from the church. In this case, they're trying to do the right thing, but let's be clear that this moral degradation that we're seeing in public life emanates from the very top. So what's happening at the very bottom? Well, there's this amazing story by a mother called Michelle Dorell, or Donnelly, and I hadn't seen this story, and I'm really, my heart was just really touched by reading it. If you get a chance, it's in The Guardian, and it covers how she's actually fed 100,000 neighbours, that's how they phrase it, over the last couple of years, with what she calls food hubs, not food banks, but food hubs. And she makes a distinction about the food hub and the food banks, because with food banks, you kind of have to be registered as, being the deprivation and not having enough money and all this kind of stuff. While with a food hub, anyone can just walk off the street and just go into the community fridge and take what they need to feed their family. I mean, there are issues that comes with that level of open access, but she's been doing it anyway. Her front room, her house apparently is just completely rammed up with food, and she goes around every week to different sites across London, or across East London, I should say, and then provides these hubs and spaces. And she struggles actually to find space. That's her biggest challenge, trying to find space to store the food. She's got so much food, she doesn't know how to store it. And the worst thing, the position that she's not going to do is actually give food away, because as soon as she does the hub, it all goes. And I was reading this story today. I mean, I had to prep for the whole program. As those of you who know me know, my time is very limited, so I prep for everything today. All these stories I read today. So if I've got little gaps in my memory, please forgive me. But from what so I read this today, and I read it was in East London. I'm like, I'm the director of the IPED Centre, a community centre in East London. How can it be that someone just down the road from where I live is actually struggling to find places to store her food? So, I mean, one of the things that we're going to do, I'm going to talk to the other directors, and we're going to see if we can work with her and see what we can do to provide a space for people to get food. You know what I mean? through her as well, because the more offerings there are for people who are in need, the better. Now, I mean, obviously anyone who wants to contact us and offer to help with the logistics of that, please do. I have very, very limited capacity when it comes to doing these projects, but I will talk to the team and we will reach out to her and see what happens with that. I mean, we are in the process of working with an amazing sister Comey at the African Community School, and she actually runs a food bank as well. So but if there's a way we can run a food bank and a food hub, and they can alternate and people can actually get access to these foods without having to worry about kind of like, the right credentials, etc. I know it's problematic, the logistics, and so I know I've got a mouth that can run sometimes so fast, but we've got the space, she needs the space, people need food, she's got the food. I know it's not as simple as that, but I'm going to try and marry them together. I've got to try, right? What else can we do? Let me hit the next story. Oh God, this one. Look, the first thing I'm going to say with this story is that you need to watch the video. Go to the Independent website, the news story, and read this story about Badu. Now, it may seem like a positive story in the sense that he got a 6-figure payout because he exposed systematic racism inside the civil service. And we started off with a story about racism in the civil service, and we continue about stories in the civil service. But he talks about how he joined the civil service because he wanted to show young people that actually you can go into these systems and you can have integrity and dignity. And what can happen is that things could improve. You can achieve the highest echelons. And what happened was that he was exposed. He was gaslit. He was exposed. He suffered from post-traumatic, what they call the post-traumatic stress syndrome. And they denied his complaints and his issues at every single opportunity. It was awful. And like his videos are maybe 5 minutes long, but it is so uplifting. It is so heartening that I thought to myself, you know what? It's like this guy is a role model. And he's saying that normally when you're in the civil service, you've got a job for life. Now he knows that he's got this payoff, but he ain't going to work in civil service again. But he's saying he don't care. He's saying, like, at the end of the day, it's far better that he's got his mental health and he's out of there and he can tell the story and tell everybody that if you're going to go into the civil service, be prepared for this kind of level of racial abuse when actually being there and suffering silence. And so watch the videos. I think it's like 5 or 6 minutes long, but I want to thank our brother for sharing this. And I'm sorry that he went through this experience. It's quite disgusting. So let me move on. I can see there's some messages from the chats. Let me see if I can tap on them. I'm not sure if they can come on there. So if I tap on, yay, excellent. So thank you, Ange. So needed in these times. Amazing. Yes, I think you're talking about the food hubs. Definitely, it's ridiculous that people are still needing to kind of do that. But that's the world that we live in, and anything we can do to help with that, we will do. So what's the next story? Let me go. I told you it's a jam-packed program, and we've got half an hour through, and I think we're just about reaching halfway there. I think I did cover this one already. So this one is about the Cabinet Office with the legal claims about racism. So let me move on to the next slide. Now, this one is a story about Sister Donna Phillips, and she won a racial discrimination case against a London-based contractor called Ballymore. Now, it's really funny because the way the Daily Mail has framed it, and this article comes from the Daily Mail, is that somebody made a joke about her hair, something like did you put your finger in an electric socket? That's why it's an afro, or something like that. And they try to trivialize these real cases of hold on, let me take the thing off. They try to trivialize these cases of racism. And the sister also complained about the fact that she heard, or was the N-word was used in her presence around 8 times, and they just kind of don't even go into that. They don't even talk about the idea that when you're going to work, you shouldn't have any expectation that you're supposed to tolerate a toxic environment, something that degrades and dehumanizes you. And so they just made it a joke about, oh, it's her hair. She's just moaning about her hair and she's getting a payout. What's the big deal? What's the problem? And this is how it all starts. And so the fact that she went to an employment tribunal, she won her case because it was proven that they could not, they discriminated on the basis of ethnicity because they referred directly to her hair, and she was successful in that. They didn't uphold the N-word complaint, which is another issue which we'll probably talk about later on. They didn't uphold that, but they did upgrade the issue about discrimination on the basis of her hair. This is something we had to be cognizant of and keep our eyes on. What's this story? And this one again, I'll bring out the details for you. This is again something I saw this on Twitter. I'm quite rubbish on Twitter, and so those of you, I'm quite rubbish on social media. But I remember chuckling when I saw this one, because somebody, I say chuckling because there was a very informative thread about the roots of these barrister wigs coming into place. And I'm not sure if you know that, if you are in a legal profession and you are a barrister, then you have to wear this ridiculous wig on your head. And it makes me cringe when I see it outside the UK, but in the UK, it's a problem as well. And the reason why this story has blown up over the last few days is because there's a barrister called Michael Etienne, and he asked advice on this from the people who kind of like make all these policies and decide what the enforcement is going to be. And he said, like, what would happen if I decided not to wear one of these things over my beautiful afro? And I said, well, you'll probably be disciplined. It's like, so if that doesn't fit over my hair, so I have to cut my hair to fit it inside there. You know what I mean? It's like, that's not discrimination. And clearly that is discrimination. If you are being forced to conform yourself in its natural state to fit in with an aesthetic that's not required for the job, something's wrong. And so there are these old guards who are coming out and say, well, the wig is a symbol of authority, it's a symbol of tradition, it's been passed over, blah, 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 blah. But what I was chuckling about on Twitter is that saying, no, not really. What happened was that when the wig was introduced, was because back in the day that the men were going board who were kind of like these barristers. And in those days, they associated boredness, as you can see here, but they thought it was syphilis. So the way to stop them being objects of ridicule was to put this ridiculous wig on their head. And then no one knew that they were bored, and therefore no one knew that they had syphilis. And that's just been carried on, and all the kind of like PR has come out about how it kind of like provides a distinction, and the bench is higher up, and blah, 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 blah. It's time, it's got to go. It's time just to have done it. And so I'm hoping that these QCs, these barristers, and Leslie Thomas is like a QC Queen's Counsel, it's like senior barrister, kind of like start pushing and prodding. Leslie Thomas, if you know the name, you might see it's because he was one of the barristers who represented, and I say represented, during the Grenfell inquiry. We haven't spoke about Grenfell for quite a while, and yeah. Anyway, that's another issue. Capacity. That's another issue we need to return to, because those families have not received justice, and the discussion has moved on from justice for the murder to the issue of the cladding. And the cladding issue is a serious issue, but murder, the social murder, the avoidable deaths, the structural violence, people have to pay for that. So anyway, that's this story. Let me move on before I gaslight myself. This was a nice story, and I do have a couple of them, not very often, but that's the news that we're dealing with. And I just found out that Black Cultural Archives, they're launching a community bid for support. They need funding. They're going to try and open up for 6 days a week, and they have 2 new recruits. They have the amazing Dr. Yvonne Thompson, who's the chairman of its board, and a new interim managing director, who's Lisa Anderson. Now, I was quite heartbroken when Enrique, the previous managing director, left the BCA. I think she did an amazing job, and I mean, I've been blessed to know both managing directors, Barbara Pablo before, and and they've all taken BCA to other stages. So I didn't know what's going to happen, and now it's nice to know that the institution is still in good, firm hands, that has the community's interests at heart. So this fundraising that's taking place is to actually raise cash so that the BCA can digitize some of its archives and also open 6 days a week. And I don't know if you remember what used to happen with the BCA, but there was a challenge with the fact that it couldn't secure enough funding, permanent funding, to keep it open. And there was a big, I think that we had all the patrons coming out who had to make a big hoo-ha to say, what's going on? This is like, one of the only, well, it is the only dedicated national archive for people of African heritage in the UK. And, you're going to let it go. And so there was a campaign, it was saved, but we mustn't take our eyes off the ball. And so this is a campaign. Again, it still irks me that it's us, those of us who don't have cash, who are being kind of like tapped on, not with the BCA, but we're still having to do this work. I do believe in self-reliance and self-funding and community development, but there's still something wrong when I think that we're paying our taxes and that money is not coming back to our institutions. Something inherently wrong and corrupt with that. The next story is well, it's deaths in custody. It's a tragic one about mental health, and you may not know, but there was an inquiry. It's the fourth inquiry for Jason Lennon, and the jury found that he died of and I'll read it out, a cardiorespiratory arrest which he suffered at the Excel Centre in London. This took place on the 31st July in 2019, and his death was due to restraint by security industry authority officer because he was placed in the prone position. Now, why this is a really important finding in this inquest, this is the fourth inquest, it's because they've actually finally acknowledged the fact that he was actually in mental distress when he was put in that position. So just to give you backdrop, previously healthy male, brother has an injury to his head, and after the injury to his head, he starts to have psychotic episodes. And so he's in the Excel Centre, and some people feel that he poses a threat to himself, his own risk, and to others, which is the narrative that we always hear. I have no reason to doubt that. But what happens is that the security officers see him in distress, and they use excessive force to place him in what we call a prone position. And this, they knew from their training, was something that was dangerous. You know, those of you who've watched this broadcast in its previous guises over the last year or so, you will know that I've spoken about positional asphyxia. This is where groups of men jump on other, individuals, and they place their arms in a position, as you saw what happened with Rashawn Charles, and they murdered them. I mean, I don't even know how to say this. Now, this isn't a death in police custody case. It's a death in security custody, and it's a strange one because the police officers turned up, they saw him on the floor, just lying on the floor, face down, and then they saw he wasn't breathing, so they tried to resuscitate him, but he was dead. And and when I hear that, you think, well, hold on, I don't know how many of you got, was it 4 or 5 of you, but did none of you think to check him or to turn him around so he could breathe? Why was it that there was a gap? The police officers come, find him dead, and they couldn't resuscitate him. So the fact that this inquest has recognised there was excessive force used against him, and that he was actually in distress when this took place. He wasn't posing a threat deliberately or maliciously to anyone else, most likely to himself. He was probably the biggest person at risk. Again, this is an issue we need to talk about. We often talk about deaths in police custody, but it's just the killing of people who are suffering in mental distress in all different settings that we've got to keep an eye on. And also this issue of positional asphyxia, which keeps getting buried under the carpet. They keep doing it, but we know that it's real. Some police forces around the country recognize and tell their officers, do not use it. Police have training, like in the case of Rashawn Charles, do not use it. Even though the officer, I think his name was Officer Matt, in the Rashawn Charles case, he used it. And even though the inquest recognized that he used an unlethal chokehold or lethal or unlawful chokehold, they still didn't convict. They didn't find him guilty of malpractice or anything. So I just wanted to share that story. This story is another one about a sickle cell. We've done quite a few stories about sickle cell because we've lost a few warriors over the last couple of weeks. Now, please forget my pronunciation because the word's a bit of a mouthful. But NICE, which is, I can't remember if it's NICE, N-I-C-E. No, it's N-E-I-C, the National Excellence something clinical, blah, blah, blah. NICE are the national body that sets the guidelines for clinical excellence. There you go, National Guidelines for Clinical Excellence. I think I've done the acronym wrong on there, my apologies. But they've approved this new treatment for sickle cell called crizanlumab. Yeah, crizanlumab. I hope I've done it right. I'm really awful when it comes to pronunciation. You might be thinking, okay, so what's the big deal about this one? Well, it doesn't cure sickle cell. There is no real cure for sickle cell. Those of you know that we have in our family, we were in the hospital a couple of weeks ago with our son for a week. It's a real condition that affects lives across the UK, in fact, across the world. But there have been, other than just treatment at gene splicing, and I'm not even going to go through blood transfusions or the bone marrow transfusions. There's no real way to cure sickle cell, so it's all been done through treatments. And there has been other kind of treatments like hydroxyurea, but hydroxyurea was was basically a drug that came out of treatments for cancer. And so it had some toxic elements to it. So a lot of people with sickle cell, even though it helps manage it, don't use it because the toxic elements of it, if there's any slippage, to use hydroxyurea, the monitoring is really stringent, then they can really fall ill. So this one actually doesn't come out of that development. So there's positive outcomes that people are thinking, well, maybe we've got a drug that has the benefits of hydroxyurea without the toxicity of hydroxyurea. Now, those of you who are watching who are part of the Sickle Cell Support Group Solace, that an amazing team. Hi everyone, that kind of like support Sickle Cell Warriors in Hackney and City and East London, or from Sickle Cell Warriors. Hi Samantha and the crew in Tottenham. There's going to be what you call it, one of these Zoom casts with Dr. Dimitri, I think Dr. Telfa. I'm not sure if you're going to be part of it, but some of the clinicians who are experts in sickle cell who are going to talk a little bit more about this treatment and what it means about sickle cell and living with sickle cell. But Channel 4 did this piece. I didn't actually see this on any other channel, actually. And this is one of the problems. In fact, what I should say is that this Channel 4 piece, if you actually go and check it out and go to YouTube to see the video clip, it's a really short piece, I think 3-4 minutes, watch it. Watch the video and then read the comments underneath. There's only like 5 or 6 comments, and you'll see why it's a serious issue that we had to keep our eyes on, because there are some disgusting comments about how, because sickle cell doesn't affect the ethnic majority, who cares? And that's the attitude that not just Johnny Come Lately has, but also some inside the medical profession have. This is why we have instances of racism. And I could have exaggerated. I just remembered some of the stories that came with that NHS racism thing about doctors being gaslit about if they complain about racism, then they won't have a career in the NHS and all these kind of things. So people came from Asia and people making comments about their language. So this is how it comes all the way full circle back to affecting patients as well. So yeah, just as a reminder, I'm Toyin Agbetu, or Brother Dr. Toyin Agbetu. You're on the Pan-African Community Network, still working at the name. Just going through the news stories of the last couple of weeks. I think we've got another 20 minutes. You can talk to us on chat on the Facebook thingy bobby. This is our first time on Facebook, so hi everyone who's seen me on Facebook. I'm thinking, what is that guy, that crazy guy doing on Facebook Live? I thought he didn't do any streaming things. We should still also be on the YouTube thingy bobby, so hopefully it's still streaming on there. I'm not checking. I'm just hoping it's working. It says it's broadcasting, so that's how it goes. Got Sister Oleander in the background, so if you've got chats, she can respond to them and answer them and that sort of stuff. And I'm just going through all the headlines. As I do every couple of weeks. I'll be here, same time, 7 o'clock in a couple of weeks. So next story, and this one again is a problem to do with racism within NHS. And this is the story of a couple. What happened was that a sister who had a history of stillbirth, kind of like miscarriages. She kind of like approached the hospital, when she was pregnant again. She was saying, look, I'm really worried. I think that there's something going wrong. Please take me serious. I know this feeling. They laughed at her. They said, look, why are you coming again? Just go home, go home. And she unfortunately had a miscarriage. And the reason I share this story is because, we've heard this over and over again, that women of African heritage are 40% more likely to have, adverse outcome when it comes to childbirth. Sometimes the mothers even pass away, not just the children as well, than women of European heritage. Remember, all these stories are within the last couple of weeks, some of them like a couple of days ago. So this is still a very live topical issue that affects, it just makes me emotional as someone who's been through a similar scenario. So this is something, again, we have to keep our eyes on. Also, we have the same problem with breast cancer. There's been a medical study that just came out that says that African women are more likely to die from breast cancer than women of European heritage. Now, why I wanted to share this one is because Legali has very limited capacity. We have some amazing sponsors and supporters, some of you out there who donate to us monthly, and it keeps our network going, our infrastructure going. But we don't have enough people doing the work like we used to have in the past. And this is a story where, I found out again today that there's actually been a research that says that women of African heritage, their system, their body operates in a different way when it comes to damaging DNA repair. So their cells operate in a different way. And so this could actually explain the discrepancy between the outcomes of women of African heritage having breast cancer and those of European heritage. And you know that I'm a nerd. You know I like to know all these figures. I haven't yet had a chance to read the report, but it really crosses my mind as I go through these stories and I read these kind of things that we need to crowdsource our activism. We you know, those of you who are interested in these kind of topics, you know, you kind of need to get in touch and just say, Brother Toyin, look, I know you're busy, but if you give me guidance, give me access to the journal. I have access to every journal. Working at UCL, you know, I have access to every latest piece of scientific research on this planet. And I read as much as I can, but I just can't address everything. And so sometimes it'd be useful to have people who are interested in particular niche areas to say, okay, I'll read it or I'll go through it. And then, you know, we'll together push and ask the right questions for the right doctors to keep an eye on it. Because this is the first time I've heard ever of there being a difference between how our DNA, how our cells repair DNA damage. And if that could lead to an explanation of this disproportionality in adverse outcomes, that would be a significant development. That could really be a game changer. Sorry for the nerdy rant, but that's what I am. Okay, so this one's about cancer, and there's been a recent push about prostate cancer. There's a story in, I think it's the Men's Health magazine, and we should know now that men are 30% more, African men are 30% more likely to die from prostate cancer. There are many signs, kind of like blood in the urine, kind of like excessive kind of like passing the water, etc. You can find view, but from the answers, why is there a gap in the testing, in awareness of prostate cancer from African men, well, people of African heritage? This is a Pan-African program, so if I say African, of course it means people of African and African Caribbean heritage. It's just, you know, ridiculous to keep saying that, and I'm not going to say use racializing language like black and white and brown and pink and all the other city colors. So one of the things that's interesting, and I'm going to go here, it's something that is very uncomfortable for me as well, and I used to have this as well, and it's really refreshing to see inside the article. It is that there is a conception in the community, and I used to have this as well, that to have a prostate cancer test, that it involves going to your GP and having an anal examination. And many of us, brothers, myself included, we're not doing that. This is not going to happen. And, you know, now I know better, but I think a lot of us still don't know better. I mean, so we know about testing, you know, our testicles in the shower and seeing if there's any lumps and stuff like that. But the idea of an anal examination is something we don't want to do. But it doesn't quite run like that. You can actually have what's called a PSA test first, which kind of like checks the level of these kind of antibodies and these kind of things in your antigens inside your bloodstream. And then if they find that it's at a certain level where it's likely that you've got prostate cancer, then they can give you another test and it can move along that route. But initially, of course, which has been told, you know, I mean, there's a blood test now. Thank you. So there are other ways of finding out whether you have cancer. But I'm not going to lie, that is a cultural barrier. This whole idea about, you know, this, I can't even say the word, the anal testing. But we're losing a lot of people. And this article in Men's Health, all the men involved talked about losing their fathers, for, you know, because what happens often with people of African heritage is that we get diagnosed too late. So when we do find out we have it, it just can't be treated. And so we lose people. So, you know, I just thought I'd raise this this issue. It's awkward talking about it. Sister Orlando, you want to come in? I think.
Yeah. So I mean, I wanted to say that it is, I think, a cultural thing, not just about specifically to do with that particular test. I think in general, our men in our community tend to just, suck it up almost if they get ill or they feel ill. Most of the time, a lot of our men will not even just go to the doctor. They'd have to be, dragging themselves to the doctor for it to happen.
Yeah, I know.
And what I wanted to say as a sister and all other sisters out there, for the men in our life, it's not just about, our husbands or partners, also our fathers, our brothers, everybody, and even talk to our sons as well. As they get older, they should know, just in the same way that we will talk to our daughters about cycles and things like that. I think it's really important for us as women to talk to our men about keeping them safe and encourage them. They're ill and you see something, encourage them to actually go to the GP and to just get it checked out. It's really important.
Thank you. And I completely second that. I'm not going to be a hypocrite. I've been guilty of all those things. It's very rare that I go to the doctors. I have to be in a really bad state, and and poor Oleander, like, she's really tiny. You need to go. Until I just get mad. Okay. and it is a cultural issue as well. Something about feeling weak. It comes from being raised in an environment that's aggressively patriarchal, that encourages toxic masculinity, and so I just thought I'd share this story, and I suppose we'll return to it. The fact that I'm uncomfortable talking about it is good. It means that it's the right thing to do. I'm not qualified to talk about how women feel about when they have to take the cervical smear test. I know that's a very uncomfortable. Well, I don't know from personal experience, but I know from what I've been told, it's an uncomfortable experience. But sometimes we have to do certain things just to make sure that we're going to be here to survive and be there for the ones that we love. Okay, let me move on to the next slide. So this one is about a young brother who's actually set up his barbershop as a safe space to discuss these issues, and I think that's a really great initiative. One of the things that we sometimes forget, I know there's that film about barbershops, kind of like where we talk about all kinds of issues, relationships and stuff like that. But what Bertrand Auguste has done in his position is actually said, you know what, if you want to talk about things like cancer, this is particularly, what I'll deal with, because he lost his father, I think, from the same situation. And what's that saying? Each one teach one. That's how we do it. And we've got to keep doing it. We've got to keep that kind of attitude alive. This one I'm not going to go on long about, because this is a really difficult one. It's a controversial one in many ways. When we talk about taboos in our community, and cancer is a taboo in our community, just like as in mental health, colorism is also a taboo. And so I don't know if any of you saw this video clip of Fandiwe Newton, who made this really emotional video on Sky News of all channels, because Sky News is like, it's like Fox, crying and talking about, she was worried that she was, she felt guilty about taking a role from a darker skinned sister. I think addressing that angst in itself would be enough, just recognizing kind of like the privilege that comes through colorism system, even though it's not her fault, right? She's born the way she's born, and I think that's a reasonable thing to do. But there's been a lot of interesting comments, because she went beyond kind of like recognizing this, and she started talking about, taking our men, she's sorry for all these kind of, and she just went in places she didn't need to go. So, I mean, like I said, we have a lot of taboos in our community. Colorism is certainly one of them. And, the issues that comes with having dual heritage and the privilege that comes with that, because of society that racializes and is racist, is real. But I don't want us to get involved in fighting amongst ourselves and kind of like divisive. That divide and rule tactic has always been successful. But we also have to know when we have to hold our corner. We take counsel before we kind of blur out into the social level. And I know I'm one to talk, because I just speak my mouth when I want to speak my mouth. But if you're in a position of what we call celebrityism, where people kind of listen to what you say and you're kind of like a role model, if you don't want to become a role model, then kind of you've got to check yourself. Okay, let's go to the next slide. And this one, if I remember correctly, is about the ethnicity pay gap. There we go. So Sky. So there's been a committee. I don't even need to. I don't even need to label this one. There's been another committee, Women's Inequalities Committee in Parliament, who said that there needs to be an ethnicity pay gap audit done by 2023. It needs to be mandatory, and the government's not responded. Surprise, surprise. And the reason why this is in the papers now is because I think it was 2016, there was this recognition that there needs to be a gender pay gap audit. And so companies over the size of 20 employees have to report and make public the discrepancy between the gender pay gap. But no such requirement is there for the ethnicity pay gap. And many of us who come from racialized communities, we kind of get it. We kind of know that, it's like there's one issue about recognizing gender, but when it comes to recognizing racism, it's just pushed to the back burner. But again, this is, like I said, all I'm doing is reporting the news. Don't shoot the messenger, right? This just came out in the last couple of days, reporting it here. Watch this space. Who knows? 2023, maybe there'll be a mandatory policy by, Priti Patel will say, yeah, it's true. Racism is bad, right? Let's change the law, So I mentioned Priti Patel, and let me open this one. And sometimes I just don't even want to go through it. This is a story about the Matrix, the gang Matrix. I don't know if you remember that one. This is some of the brilliant work done by Brother Stafford Scott in Tottenham, which exposed that there's a database run by the Met Police where they place young men with African heritage on it and label them as gang runners. Now, I'm a nerd, right? So I get the need for data to analyze problems, etc. There's not a problem with kind of like, creating a database if it's going to be used ethically. And, the people who are on there are those who are actually involved. The reason why the gang matrix was actually so controversial was because the police were placing young, innocent men of African heritage on it, children as well. If they had any kind of contact with the police, if they had any relationship with someone who's involved in criminality, even if they were victims of criminality, they went on the gang matrix. And so they were creating a database which was criminalizing a whole swath indiscriminately of the African community across London with no oversight. Now there is now they say that there's like 12 officers who've got permission to make sure that they maintain the data regulations that go with it to make sure that it's not exploited, blah 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 blah. But I think is it what's that? Liberty. I think it's Liberty. Liberty is saying nah, you're still doing the same messed up practices that Stafford complained about. So we're going to now try and take legal action against you because you're still doing it. So that's why I kind of want to highlight that. And this is going to run up for the first story about the police, as we know. The next story about the police, and this one is probably the one that most of you probably have heard over the last few days, is the disgusting report from the IOPC that shows that Metropolitan Police officers were joking about raping women and actually the deaths of African babies. They were making homophobic jokes, they were making Afrophobic jokes, they were making misogynistic jokes. They're obviously labeled as banter. And some of the officers that were doing this got promoted. Now, this report is kind of like investigating things that took place in 2016. But this culture is still in the Met now. It might not be as blatant as that, but this is what's taking place in Charing Cross Road. One of the things that freaks me out is that I was actually locked up in Charing Cross Road after the walk, during that process, during that time when this racism was going on, where officers are making jokes about African children. And I just talked about the gender pay gap and ethnicity pay gap and how one takes a different kind of priority. Just as a heads up, with this Guardian article, the headline doesn't actually mention the headline, doesn't mention the racism, doesn't mention the talking about the deaths. I can't be clear because I haven't seen the report yet about the killing of African babies. They only talk about the misogyny because misogyny is the flavor of the month. And I'm not playing hierarchies against each other, but I think it's really important that we watch to see how the media reports and deprioritizes which issues are the ones that we act on and which are the ones we just kind of accept as, well, it's racism, it's African people, blah, 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 blah. So, I mean, I've modified the headline to make it relevant to us, but the initial reporting talks about the rape, and I'm not obviously, condoning anything like that, but it doesn't really talk about the murdering of African babies. So, I mean, I think this is the uncomfortable stuff that we don't like to talk about, but I always will. There is something strange going on here as well at the same time, and we don't have to deal with one or other. We can deal with both at the same time. We shouldn't be pitting gender against ethnicity or against racism, and this is why the concept of misogyny is so important, because that intersection that Kimberly Crenshaw talks about kind of addresses the issues that fall between the cracks. And so, there's another story that comes from an officer. Let me pick up the screen. There's another officer who was working in the station in 2006. And she says that actually, while I was working in Charing Cross Station, it was worse than that. I know this stuff is still going on because while I was there, serving officers were calling African officers, their colleagues who actually worked in the same station as them, they were calling them monkeys. Not only were they calling them monkeys, they were making racist abuse. They were sleeping with prisoners. So they'd arrest a woman and they'd be having sex with them. So they're arresting, assuming, sex workers. They would be going to Rhinehouse Spear House and talking about their favorite Russian women to kind of have relationships with. They were just corrupt. And so for people who think that the kind of heyday of corruption in police that took place at Stoke Newington Police Station, it was long gone. Nah. That's still alive and kicking now. This officer's actually, she left the force. I think she left after 2 years. She just I can't deal with this, and moved. I don't think she left the force. She left that station, Charing Cross, and went somewhere else because she just couldn't hack it. Do you know what I mean? So, she was saying that, they would have women in the cells and kind of they would kind of shift people out of the way so they couldn't hear what was going on. And she just didn't want any part of it. So this is a current issue that is still taking place. It's not just corrupt officers against the public, it's also corrupt officers against other officers inside the force. So if you're a female officer, an African officer, you are also facing this disgusting misogyny and racism. So how does it manifest itself in the community? Well, we now know that the sister Yvonne Farrell, Rastafarian, was awarded 45 grand after she eventually, and she had to fight, won her case against the police after they left her naked in a cell, gave her some, they left her naked and then afterwards gave her some kind of tight hot pant, telling her, cover yourself up with this thing to her to wear. This is an elder in her 50s, right? And they tried to gaslight her, denied it happened. She eventually won, and people were saying, "Well, what was she doing? Why did she get arrested in the first place?" Well, I tell you what she was doing. Somebody was trying to tow a car. She sat on a car. So it's just "No, you're not taking the car. You're not taking the car." So they arrested her. How does that justify placing her in a cell, stripping her down naked? Like she says, they were trying to humiliate me. How is that modern day policing? So people think the money solves everything. It doesn't. It's like I was saying earlier with our brother in that video I said you got watching the civil service. The money, yeah, that's a community thing, but that money that comes out of our pockets. It's at the public purse. You and I are paying compensation to our own people for things that we haven't done. Them people who are getting salaries, they're just got to go. Their salaries have to be cut. They're the ones who need custodial sentences. That's when you start to understand the principles of justice, of my art. When they're just getting, even if the sister got £1 million, we are the ones who are paying that. So the officers who were involved in the decision and colluded, who hid it and who fought it and defended them, all that kind of stuff, they need to lose their jobs, lose their pensions and go to jail. Then we start to have justice. And then other officers start to get the message that this kind of culture, this toxic culture that lies in the police, it's not going to be tolerated. But we're still a very, very long way away from that. And I say that because there's a film going around called The Black Cop. And it covers the story of this young officer, well, I say young officer, he was a young officer when I think when he joined. He's been in the force for like 25 years. I've forgotten his name. My apologies for that. I can't remember everything. He was the first officer to come out as gay, and he talked about how, you know, his time in the force was awful. I think it's probably like one of the Ferdinand brothers in football. You know how, you know, his complaint isn't about homophobia though. It's about racism, and this picture here shows when he was painted in white paint by his colleagues for an event, and he just talks about that actually the culture that exists in the police then still exists in the police now. It's canteen culture. You know, I've always been saying this. It's one of the projects I really want to do while I'm at UCR. I want to investigate canteen culture and implement solutions to eradicate it. But it'll be ragga. You know, I don't play with those kind of things. And so he talked about this culture that still exists in the police. And one of the things I found really interesting, and I enough respect for this brother for doing this, for saying this. He says that he was actually he is, what's the word he used? He didn't say co-opted, but he complicit. That's the word he used. He said he was complicit in his own abuse, and that takes courage to admit that. So what he was saying was that they were doing these things to him. They were being just racist towards him. And actually, he just wouldn't. The culture was so strong, he wouldn't speak out against it. He would just tolerate it and be silent about it. And you know, and then now he's not. But he was in the force for a very long time, accepting it. And now he's out. You know, this film's out. I haven't seen this film yet. I want to big up Sister Nadia Denton, who I know who's doing some promotion for this. But now this film's coming out. I think it's up for awards. He's coming out and saying, actually, if you want to change the Met, it's not just changing the top and just taking off the head like the Cressida Dix and all that kind of likes. You've also got to deal with the rank and file, the ones that are protected by the Police Federation, because that's where the cancerous culture is stemming from. Okay, almost there. Thank you. I think we're running a little bit over time, 6 minutes over time. So this is a story about football. I don't know anything about football, those of you who know that, but I do know a lot about Afrophobia. And this is a story where the Chelsea Football Club has decided to pay a six-figure sum to some teenagers between 14 and 18 years old for the abuse that they experienced while at the club in their teens. I mean, it's just outrageous. And the club, the two people, the main people who are responsible for this abuse, they kind of deny, oh, I wasn't racist, I wasn't horrible, you know, blah, 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 blah. But you know what happened? When they started arranging a case against them and they started setting a trial date, and it was about to be 5 days and extended to 8 days, and they had something like 60 witnesses, 60 witnesses, Chelsea thought, you know what, hear what? Let's just chuck some money at them and hope it goes away. And it has gone away. And it's good that these teenagers are going to get, you know, like some compensation for this. I would have still liked the day in court. I still would have liked to expose it. But of course, a club like Chelsea with its money, they don't want the scandal. So they're just kind of like, no, it's been settled. Don't need to talk about it anymore. I'm hoping that one of those teenagers, I mean, like I said, between the ages of 14 and 18 years old, subjected to incessant racist abuse. We don't really know all the details, so I'm not going to try and guess and talk about that. But that's what's going on. Remember, again, I keep saying this. These are all the stories over the last couple of weeks, not the last decades, the last couple of weeks. Even though this case is an older case, it was settled this week. Same thing. Remember that all this stuff in sports stemmed from cricket, the Yorkshire Cricket Club, and the racism that was taking place there. And the chairman, Patel, I don't know his surname, and anyone who knows me, I don't use these lord titles, all that kind of foolishness. So this chairman Patel, who's really, we've spoken about him before, he's really pushing the barriers, kind of like trying to get change inside that club. He's saying that, you know, he's engaged in a civil war. Now that the media's moved on, it's like, you know, they're pushing back. And the former chairman, the one who kind of like stepped down, who was implicated in all this, he claimed that racism has never, that classic gaslighting thing. Now that the press ain't on his back, he's saying that actually none of those claims have been substantiated. So he stepped back for what? Because he was innocent. You understand? Now I know what it's like to be pushed, you know what I mean, and in a way that you resign. That's not a situation that he's going under. So he knows that this racism is real. He knows exactly what's taking place. But now that there's no spotlight on him, he can make these kind of claims. And so Yorkshire Cricket Club is a situation that, you know, that we should be keeping our eyes on that. But of course, this is what happens. You know, people move on. You know, issues of the day, they move on before they're resolved, and the problem just festers and remains. And oh god, this is a hard one to talk about. This is the football one. I haven't even seen the video that I was talking about, but this is the football story about Kurt Zuma, and he's the player who was being and there was massive outrage, and rightly so. You know, those of you who know me, I'm pretty much vegan. You know, I don't know why he would do something so horrific. But let's problematize this. And one of the questions that his teammate is actually asking is, why, with all the fuss that's been taking place over this incident, why isn't that same thing happening over players who've been prosecuted for racism? Why is the scale of outrage different? Why are the welfare of animal lives seen as far more important than African lives? And it is African lives, not human lives, because what you should be noticing right now is that, you know, if it's an animal, if it's it impacts European women, then it's something we've got to do something about. But if it's African lives, then we shouldn't do it. And I'm not for one moment, before anyone comes back at me with some kind of foolishness, I'm not for one moment justifying and saying and for like a was it 3 weeks? No, 3 days salary. No, was it? No, it's free. Like, no, I can't remember what it was. Was it 3 weeks salary? He's been fined 3 weeks salary, and that 3 week salary is £250,000. Something in my spirit kind of didn't sit right now. And we talked about this before, that there are those amongst us who are earning £250,000 in a few days, and then we have someone who's going to lose her home because she hasn't got £2,000. We have a woman who's got food and she's given up all the space in her house and with her 4 children so she can feed other people who've got food. And I'm saying that there's a level of consciousness that we need to reach in our community when we have multi-millionaires walking amongst us who could actually make some serious change for the good. I'm not just talking about the things that Marcus Rashford is doing. That's amazing that he's raising the profile. But I'm talking about it's time that we put our hands in our pockets and started spending that cash to help improve the situation. But I know I'm conflating different issues, but you know, I think I was watching the news and he said, yeah, he's been fined a couple of weeks' salary, so he's going to be paying £250,000. And then me and Oleander just went, yeah. This is not the politics of envy. This is the politics of responsibility. So, I mean, we'll come back to this issue again another time. So, as we have been covering over the last couple of months, I just want to share a news update. I don't know why it's not popping up. There we go. There's a young 15-year-old by the name of Kayla. Is it Kayla? Kayla. She's been missing from Harrogate since Friday, the 4th of February. If anyone has seen her, the photograph is there. Please contact the missing person unit on the number on the screen. You should be able to, hopefully, I don't know how it works with Facebook, but on YouTube, you should be able to play this after I've finished and kind of like get the numbers. But you can also call 101 and quote the number. You know, we've spoken about this epidemic of missing people, often children. That's underreported in the media. Legality doesn't have the resources to do this every week, but it is pretty bad. So you know, that's just one that came up this week. So if you do see her, do the right thing and keep your eye on other kind of alerts. We just don't have the capacity to do it, but we have to do it. And this is a good story, a good ending story. Before I give a couple of announcements right at the end, this is the reparations minister for Antigua, and he's making closer ties with Africa, pushing together for closer political, economic, social unity. And we are a Pan-African organization. And so Doreen Amadi, I want to big him up for the work that he's trying to do. He's also willing to problematize the relationship with Europe and kind of the exploitative relationships that are taking place. We've seen the amazing feat of Barbados becoming a republic. It was amazing to see that happen in my lifetime. And these changes are incremental, but they'll keep coming. And as long as there are people who recognize the right for us to self-determine, I give thanks for being able to share these stories. Now, the next two slides are a bit self-serving, but I just want to big up the youth police monitoring group in Hackney called Account. And okay, it's not doing that thing again. There we go. And they're going to have a launch this Wednesday, 16th of February at 6 to 8 p.m. at the IDPAD Empowerment Centre. Yep, that's the same centre that I'm a member of. So those of you who are interested, please check it out. They are amazing scrutiny group, amazing young people doing some amazing work. In fact, they're so positive. I mean, if you have a chance to read their report on Stop and Search in Hackney, please check it out. And if you can make it, drop an email to the IDPAD team or to the account team. Kind of like, I think they've got an Eventbrite page, and come down. I'm immensely proud of all of them, especially my baby girl who kind of did the art for work for some of the scene. And you're welcome to attend there. And on Saturday, next Saturday, there's going to be an event, an amazing event at the at the Museum of London Docklands. It's organised by the Decolonising the Archives group, an amazing network of activists and scholars who are hosting this event on community awareness, activism and social justice in the age of global restitution. So I'll be there. I'll be doing a presentation. So if you want to see Big Mouth in person, I'll be there between 12 and 4 p.m. next Saturday, and I'll explaining what we can do to make things a better way using scholar activism to progress social justice claims. And we're going to have a grounding session. So any question is welcome. So please spread the news. And I think that's it. I think we went a little bit over time, 17 minutes over time. Apologies for that one. But this is the first time on this platform. For those of you who are wondering, Toyin or Leander, have you really moved again? Is this your fifth move in like a couple of months? Yeah, we are in a hotel at the moment. Unfortunately, we're still having problems with our housing. It's amazing. Everyone, no matter who everyone is facing some kind of challenges. It's a bit of a nightmare living like this in a hotel. And but hey, we all got to do our thing. I want to thank you for.
Sorry,
There's a question. Do you want to put it on screen?
Oh, sorry.
So Sister Leander says there's a question. Could you post it up, please? Oh, is this the? Thank you. Good. Thanks for the question. Is this the events for the account and the Decolonising the Archives? What I'll do, I'll get a flyer, an e-flyer from them, and then I'll put it on my Facebook page. I'm really notoriously a bit late on those things, so I'll try and do it this week. So I apologize if it's not today, but I will try and put those things online so that they can be shared, etc. Give thanks for that, and each one teach one. We have to support our young people, especially those who are interested in this kind of work and moving forward in the spirit of justice and art. And so, as ever, I want to thank our brother Colin from Saffronwood, who did amazing research this week. This program wouldn't have happened without him doing the research and sending it on to me, so I can actually engage in the deep dive and present it for you. And also our amazing supporters who continue to make monthly donations. This platform I had to pay for today, and I couldn't do that without those donations. So this is, we're still here, we're still doing our thing, and when I get the capacity, we need to rebuild. Those of you who are willing to help, even if it's one day a week, one day a month, every little bit helps, because as a community, this is the only way we're going to make the progress that we want to see. So I don't know, Oleander, if you want to say anything before I sign off.
I nearly forgot to unmute. Yes, thank you everybody for being a part of our show, and we do hope you enjoyed it and had some education from it and information, and hopefully we'll see you again next time. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no idea where we'll be. It could be here, it could be, I have no idea, yet another location. But even if I had to broadcast from my phone, those of you who know me will know that I will continue to do the works that our community requires. And I'm just going to close as ever and say, may the ancestors continue to guide and protect us. Ashe.